Hi, welcome back to the RP Book Club. I'm your host, as always, Rosie Peat, and I'm super excited to bring you a really fun episode today where I talk to the completely brilliant Derek Künsken, in theory, about his latest novel in the quantum evolution series, The Quantum War. But we also went off on some interesting tangents and talked about music, movies, and philosophy, as well as the book. It's worth mentioning up here at the top that you don't need to have read the rest of the series, or indeed any of the series, to enjoy the episode. Derek gives some really useful context early on that should help you know kind of where we're at. And there are also no spoilers for the other books in the series or related books, so you can still enjoy those even after you've heard this. As always, if you'd like to share your thoughts on the show with us, we'd really love to hear them. You can tweet at Rebellion Pub or email publishingpress@rebellion.co.uk to let us know what you like about the show, if you're enjoying listening to it, anything you might want to hear more of, or anything you feel like we could change. I really, really hope that you all have as much fun listening to this episode as we clearly did recording it. Derek Künsken has built genetically engineered viruses, served as a Canadian diplomat, and, most importantly, taught his son about superheroes and science. His short fiction has appeared in Analog Science Fiction, Face Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and in Asimov's science fiction multiple times. His stories have been adapted into podcasts, reprinted in various years' best anthologies, translated into multiple languages, and shortlisted for several awards. Derek, thank you so much for being on the RP Book Club.
Thanks, Rosie.
So we're unusually, for this podcast, we're having the third in the series as our book club pick. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of where we're at in the story for anyone who maybe hasn't read the rest of the series yet?
Sure. So the series is a space opera set about 500 years in the future. Basically humanity has spread out across some part of the galaxy because they discovered some wormholes, which is one of my favorite tropes from space opera. The first book was basically a sort of Ocean's 11 in space. The second book was a bit of a Back to the Future in space. This third book is a war story. So the Quantum Magician began with a rebellion and the heist that went around that. And this book is now getting into, what happens with that war. How does that unspool?
Oh yeah, I have to say I've really enjoyed the series so far, and I love the comparisons there. I love that you can really take the first one and be like, hey, it's a heist movie, and yeah, it really, I think, is quite different to a lot of other sort of harder sci-fi, and it, for me, has been really refreshing and great to read.
Oh, thanks.
And I think, well, I don't think, I know we publish it. The House of Six has been out a little while now. I think I've got the hardcover.
About a year. Well, a year in ebook.
It came out in the ebook first.
Yeah. It's a beauty. It's a beauty.
Really is.
And we know it weighs 886 grams because my agent had an online weighing event where she used her kitchen scale, and her kitchen scale is quite accurate, and she even had to tear the scale before starting, and so it averaged at 886 grams.
I think that was maybe one of my favorite moments of any book cycle. I was doing the Twitter for Rebellion Publishing at the time, and just retweeting it and watching it was really made my day.
Oh, it was wonderful. Yeah, it was soothing.
I'm voting for much more book weighing. It's like ASMR.
Exactly.
So how would, say somebody's read The House of Six, how does that interact with this series?
So the sort of political big heavy in the Quantum Magician, Quantum Evolution series is the Venusian congregate. And they were the first to find wormholes. They were the first to, really expand. And they're very self-preservation-y and so on. So it's a lot of fun to see them in the quantum evolution series, but I wanted to write the beginning of their story, and so I went back 250 years, and it's not a prequel in a prequel real sense. I mean, they're utterly independent stories, but they're like taking two points in history. And so the foundation of the Venusian congregate, the very start, from just their beginnings as a Quebecois colony in the clouds of Venus, is the story of the House of Styx. And it was just such a different story to write, a so much more contained story. And yet I was like, in many ways, it's a much expanded story because you're talking about a society rather than individuals.
Yeah, completely. And was that something that was really important for you to include to reflect kind of your own heritage?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm 10th generation Quebecois Acadian on my mother's side. And it all began, the congregate and everything else began with a story I was writing for Analog, maybe in 2012. And the story just wasn't coming together for me. Like, it was a survival story set in the clouds of Venus, and it wasn't coming together for me until I realized that who the people were in the story and why they were on Venus. And it was the Quebecois. And then all of a sudden it opened up a mountain of cultural possibilities, of linguistic possibilities, of character possibilities, of thematic and metaphorical possibilities, because it's a complex society in Canada right now, and it will be in the future, no matter which direction it goes politically.
Let's do a reader question, because I'm always keen to get one going early on.
Me too.
Let's do, this is an interesting one. We had a reader write in and ask, what would you recommend to someone who has read and loved the Quantum Evolution series so far? What would you recommend they read next?
I really like British space opera. And one of the writers I really enjoy is Alastair Reynolds. I think there's a ton of stuff among his books. He's very prolific. And I read one of his collections, Galactic North, that had a really great sampling of his short fiction that covered a lot of the world he'd built. And that collection was one of the reasons why I had started putting my own short stories in the same universe, because I wanted that sort of interaction happening in the back of my fiction as well. So yeah, Alastair Reynolds, I would definitely say take a look at his stuff.
I have to say that particular reader listener was kind of mad that they'd run out of Quantum Evolution so far. So I think they're going to be very excited to get their hands on this book. And we had another very excited listener ask, do you have any more titles planned in this series?
I sure do. They're
going to be super happy to hear that.
I talked with Michael, my editor, a couple of years ago, and he was saying, things are going well, and what's have you got more in the series? And at that point I had been waffling with a 3-book series, but really I had one additional story I wanted to tell with the Quantum Evolution series. And so Solaris and I signed the contract a couple of years ago, or maybe it was just last year. Who knows? Time is weird now with the pandemic.
Time is a strange concept that I've lost all sense of at this point.
So, I think it was 2 years ago we signed the contract for Quantum Temple, and that'll be the final book in the series.
I'm sad that it's going to be over, but I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. No, me too. Me too.
But it can't go on forever.
No, and to be honest, I'm each book gets a little harder, because I think I did things with each previous book that I'm trying to do something different. I'm trying to improve as a writer, and so each book feels harder and harder to write, because I think my ambitions are getting bigger too. So it doesn't make things easier. Yeah,
of course. And I think as a writer, there's got to come a time where you want to tell a new story, where you really want to move on to a different world. And it sounds like that's maybe happening for you.
Yeah, well, I'm writing House of Saints right now, and I
Hmm.
have to deliver that by I think March to Michael, and then it'll be on to Quantum Temple, and that's I have to give it to him I think by January of 2023,
Hmm.
and then
Which
yeah,
feels like a long time right now, but won't be.
exactly, exactly.
Do you have any sense yet of where you might go after that?
My agent's got a couple of books that we have not started marketing yet.
Mm.
And part of that is because my agent, I really like that Kim May Kirtland, like she cares about,
Mm.
is this Derek's best work?
Yeah.
And so she's got an epic fantasy of mine that's like 200,000 words, which is for readers who don't know, it's basically like taking two quantum magicians and putting them together.
Yes.
So her estimate is we've probably got 3 to 6 months of work to do on that epic
Hmm.
fantasy before we even decide to show it to publishers.
Okay.
I also 2 years ago wrote a short horror novel, and uh, that was a big stylistic departure for me, and I really think it's a cool story, but
Mm.
she and I like she gave me a bunch of notes on it, so I've got a lot to think about before getting. So those books are there, but
Hmm.
I'm in mid editing phase of both.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. This feels like a good moment to ask if you have, well, really about how you got into writing and how you became an author, and whether you have any advice for readers who might want to start.
So as far as getting into writing, I was in French immersion, so that means I took all French until
Hmm.
grade two when I started taking an hour of English every day. And in grade two, when I started learning how to write in English, suddenly I just started writing. Like
Oh,
I
wow.
started writing my own stuff, and I remember having to go into the kitchen to ask my grandmother, walked, does it end with a D or does it end with a T, that
Mm.
sort of thing. And so it began as soon as I had access to the written English language in my own hands. Um, but really, I wrote my first book when I was in grade four, and my
Hmm.
grade four teacher published it, made 32 copies. One of the parents typed it.
Oh, wow.
Everybody in the kid got a copy. I wrote another book in grade eight for a school, assignment, and
Hmm.
then that was still, just kid stuff. And then my first novel that I tried to write with the intent of it being published for something, I started when I was 15. My advice, somewhat tongue in cheek, would be I think Harlan Ellison gave great advice, which was if anybody can persuade you not to write, they really should. Because, if I had devoted all of the hours in my life that I'd been writing to, let's
Mm.
say, a job flipping burgers in McDonald's, I'd be rich. And so you really like you're not doing it for the money, you're not doing it for anything
Yeah.
else. The amount of failure in writing is just like harden your skin to that and just
Mm.
improve, and like how do you even improve on you, right? I mean, it's not like there's a
Yeah.
path for this. And so part of my way was trying short fiction. I'm not a natural short fiction writer, but when I was 30, I started doing that. And my writing started to really become more successful once I went through a period of about 18 months to 2 years where I was basically listening to one short story every day on my
Mm.
commute. So imagine you're listening to 5 stories a week for about 2 years, and
Yeah.
it's easy to do. You can go to Beneath Ceaseless Skies, you can go to Clarkesworld, you can go to Lightspeed, you can go to um, any of the Escape Pod series. So, and you can do it for free because they're all just available for download.
Mm.
And what I would do is on about a third of them, I would, sometimes stop the listening and I'd be identifying where's the inciting incident?
Yeah.
What is this character arc? Where's the real change? Where's the
Mm.
opposition happening? And it's so that sort of analytical approach to listening over 2 years. When I'd done that, my writing really started to unstick. And I don't know if it was anything conscious, but and so it might be just that listening to that many stories really started to get some of the sort of story beats and story possibilities into my
Yeah.
head, so I had more chance. So essentially it's reading, and I think
Mm.
there's bad reading and good reading. I think I did a lot of bad reading earlier in my career because I was trying to write novels, and I,
Mm.
was reading Edgar Rice Burroughs, and that's like trying to learn medicine by reading textbooks from 1912.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was reading comic books, which is not at all a medium I think that lends itself to a lot of useful lessons for novel writing. So
It's
yeah,
a
anyway,
totally different medium,
yeah,
right? It's, has
yeah.
immense value in its own right, but it's not the point of reference you needed.
No, exactly. So I engaged in a lot of undirected and probably useless attempts to learn for many, many, many years.
They almost, I think, for some people certainly form an important part of the process that you have to just keep failing until you get there. I think that's very much a part of the writing experience that I don't know if you'd agree, but I think it's sometimes overlooked when people sort of, or your regular writing advice of, oh, just do 1,000 words a day and it'll be fine.
Mhm.
And I think it's sometimes difficult to get over that first draft syndrome where you really think it's going to be great right out.
Yeah, it never is. It never is.
No.
First drafts are meant to be terrible.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that's, I've been asking kind of on most episodes of this, if you, all you successful authors, have any advice for those of us who aren't yet. And the number one piece that I think's come out is just your first draft will be terrible, and that's okay.
Yeah. Read. That's the other thing. I didn't want to do
Mm,
it because at some point there's always a time crunch, right? Because you've got to
mm,
live while you're trying to write. So you have a
yeah.
job, you have friends, you have a family. And so for me, I remember in my 20s and even 30s, the question was, do I want to write more or do I want to read? And
Mm,
it's a bit of a false um, problem, because if you consider reading as part of your writing training, then all of a sudden you can
yeah.
maybe see it. But I had this false competitiveness for my time, and often chose writing over reading, which is not allowing me to improve.
Mm, that's very true. Yeah, I have to read more.
You can listen to stuff, use your commute time.
Yeah,
That's what I did.
yeah, that's a very good idea. I think that's something that I've really missed in the sort of more uh, intense phases of the pandemic with the lockdowns and
Yeah.
things like that. That I suddenly, my reading went from, you know, maybe a book a day between listening and reading to just nothing. It really
Yeah.
disappeared. And I think a lot of people have been experiencing that.
What I've started doing just in the last few weeks has been making sure I get out and walking 45
Mm.
minutes to an hour, but that gets really dull. So I'm now listening to audiobooks as I walk, and that's working out really well.
Do you have any writing superstitions or particular rituals or anything like that?
Not really.
Mm.
If I'm procrastinating at home, pre-pandemic, I would have gone to a library, or I would
Mm.
have gone to a coffee shop or someplace where basically the amount of possible procrastinatory distractions, like pick up a book or watch TV or play a
Mm.
video game, go away. So but I don't think that's a superstition. I think it's just something that worked for me.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't start very superstitious. I trained in science, and so I told my son once that ghosts have no power over scientists. So
I love that.
yeah.
While we're on the science, tell me a little bit about the science in the book and how kind of your background influenced that. It feels like a really, I mean, it's sci-fi, right? But it feels like a
Mhm.
particularly important part of this. And it doesn't feel sort of outside of the realms of the possibility of our reality.
Mhm.
It feels very grounded.
Yeah, so there's science that is super speculative to the point that it's really magic. And so that's your
Mm.
wormholes, it's your faster than light travel, it's anti-gravity. And I only use those when I have to. I don't
Mm.
use anti-gravity at all. I use wormholes as a way to get around, but otherwise I try and keep most of the stuff pretty much based in something that I can find in a textbook. But uh, when you get to the point of being able to genetically engineer the next generation, and those changes will end up sticking in the population,
Mm.
um, when we can intentionally change things for particular purposes in ourselves, like literally we're rewriting
Yeah.
ourselves, all of a sudden you're getting into people talk about, oh, AIs are going to be the singularity, and, they're going to be writing their own code and so on.
Mm.
We're not far from that right now, like
Yeah.
10, 20, 30 years. We're basically going to be doing that ourselves. And once you do that, there's ways that humanity can change and separate into different subpopulations. And that's one of the big themes of the quantum
Mm.
evolution series. So I trained as a molecular biologist. I did up to my master's on it. And this book is about some of the more meta implications of the subspeciation of
Mm.
humanity, and what is it about, and what does it mean, to
Yeah.
because you uh, you know Neanderthals are no longer around. Some bred with us, but it doesn't look from the genetic evidence that there was a whole lot of interbreeding. There was
Mm.
some, but at the same time, they were we have no reason to suspect that it was that the Homo sapiens just went out and massacred them all
Mm.
either, because the populations were too low, and you know they weren't really going to be mixing that much. But I mean,
Yeah.
we're dealing with evidence from 100,000 to 40,000 years ago.
Mm.
But in a real sense, it's possible to destroy habitats. It's possible to shrink habitats, and year by year, you wouldn't notice the difference. And then, after a while, you've got less and less food, and
Yeah.
so on. And I mean, over the course of a few thousand years, it's easy to, eh, outcompete a
Yeah.
population to the point of extermination.
Mm.
And so those kinds of worries, I've never applied them or to modern sort of setting. Like, really, what does it mean, like, if there was another branch of humanity around,
Mm.
suddenly you've got competition happening again. So anyway, I think you're right that some of the life sciences, the biological sciences, the molecular biology, and also the evolution,
Mm.
is a front and center part of the book. Like, not that anybody has lectures on them or stuff, but they're there for those who want to think about them, they're there. And otherwise, there's a bunch of action and plots and stuff going
Yeah.
on, and everybody's trying to do stuff to the other people. But yeah, that was really important to me. I like
Mm.
to have to ponder and think about my sci-fi philosophically. Ultimately,
Mm.
I base it in science, but I think science has questions that have moral and philosophical
Mm.
implications to us, and what we should do. And I think that's what science fiction should be doing. It should be making us reflect on the now.
Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's been really interesting, sort of in reviews and things like that, to see who's picking up on the more philosophical side and who's kind of more down the plot side. For me, I have a philosophy degree,
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm really yeah. My BA was in philosophy, and my master's is in publishing. So yes, I definitely was more focused on that.
Oh, nice. That's really cool.
It was an interesting path.
Yeah, yeah. Scott Baker is a philosopher. I think he did his PhD in it. He's a Canadian writer, and
Mm.
he did the Prince of Nothing epic fantasy series. And look like looking at a fantasy writer whose starting point is philosophy.
Mm.
So cool. His first three books, I really love them. Um, yeah, yeah, really, really good.
I'm going to see how I can throw philosophy into my writing. It's probably already there and I just haven't noticed.
Probably it is. Yeah, exactly. It's hard to know yourself in the beginning when you've only got a few samples that, are meeting your own standards.
Yeah, completely. I always think with philosophy, I always remember the first time we had a lecture. We all sat in this room, and there weren't very many of us because everybody had chosen to do other things. And the lecturer came in and went and put like a chair down in the middle of the room and went, right, where is the color located? And you could just see the people in the room, the ones who were like able to entertain that and to think about that, and the ones who just went, no, can't do this. And in the end, one girl actually did walk out and was just like, it's just there. It's there. And I'm going, yeah, but where?
That's awesome.
So this is a really fun one. I ask always because I am a complete music nerd. First off, do you listen to anything while you're writing? Because mostly people say no. Oh, you do? Yeah. Finally.
Yeah. So when I go into a coffee shop or something, if I hear people talking, those words will intrude on what I'm trying to put into the computer. So what I do is music becomes a bit of a white noise for me. Quantum Magician had music I had culled from different soundtracks. And in fact, it got to the point that for different points of view, I would have different subdirectories of music that I would play. And so, there's more angry music for stills and, flipped out crazy music for the puppets, stuff like that. When I was writing The House of Sticks, it was around 2016. And so I had a lot of 2016, 2015, 2014 music I was listening to, and it was a book I think I wrote relatively quick because I wasn't working at the time. And so, as dissonant as it may sound, I mean, there's stuff like Katy Perry and, like whatever that just is in the background while I'm doing my writing, whether at home or somewhere else. For this book, The Quantum War, it was written almost entirely during the pandemic. And my playlists last year were, I've been making myself a lot of YouTube YouTube playlists of either concerts of songs I would have liked otherwise. So you hear a slightly different version of the song, or covers. So you get these really talented people, maybe they're real, professional musicians, maybe they're people who are just literally doing this in their music class or in their kitchen. And covers of all sorts of songs. And so that's what I was listening to a lot of during the writing of this. And I think probably in this, because I wrote it in 2020, there's some 2020 music in there as well.
I'm a big fan of covers that sound really different to the original. I was literally listening to some immediately before we did this. I was listening to Bring Me the Horizon in the Radio 1 Live Lounge. Okay. And I would highly recommend that. It's very good.
Okay. We should trade playlists or something.
Oh, completely. 100%. I love a playlist. And I always find I'm more able to listen through other people's playlists because I tend to skip around a lot. So yeah, I'm definitely down for a playlist swap.
Although the first rule of Derek's music is Derek has terrible taste in music. So I may end up like, who did a really good version of this Carpenters song, right? It's like you're starting with really bad taste and then you just have somebody else sing it.
Yeah. The caveat for all of my playlists that I always say to anybody is it's going to be really random.
Yeah.
And doesn't really fit together, but it's good.
Yeah, I don't even claim that mine is good, but the singers are good.
I bet it is good. But yeah, we'll do a playlist swap. It'll be great. I've now started thinking about music. Right, focus.
We could switch to philosophy.
Yeah, go back to philosophy. This is now a philosophy and music podcast.
We could have a philosophy podcast. I mean, it would be fun to book club and discuss with other people some of the philosophical questions in some of this.
Completely. I always find it really interesting. I try and do it with like my friends and family, and they're just like,
Yeah.
no.
No, I mean, like the puppets themselves, like their very existence is a crime against humanity.
Mm.
And they're continuing to commit crimes against humanity themselves. And yet at the same time, they didn't make this. They, you
Yeah.
know, it's like you get into questions of moral relativism and
Mm.
like just it's so anyway, that's why I get into there. Also, I should just apologize for the puppets to everybody.
Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the sense of place that we have in the series. So clearly it's not somewhere we've ever been. And I think you really instill a very clear sense of place. And it's really, I've heard you in kind of other podcasts and interviews talk about having a sense of wonder. And I can really feel that. How do you go about just building this really incredible world?
I mean, so take Venus, for example. There's not a lot of creating I have to do. All I have to do is look up what is it like, and it's all like it's fascinating and it's compelling and it's different. And all I have to do is I have to say, okay, based on what I just read about the temperature, the pressure, the humidity, the acidity, then it becomes me trying to paint a picture with words. Some other things like, what is it like, the base for Rudo in this book is set in their home system, and they've got it around a gas giant that looks a lot like Neptune. And I just looked at Neptune and I said, okay, how would I describe a Neptune-y sort of planet there? And for inside, let's say the puppet-free city, I was very much thinking about what would super lazy people who are so unconscionably terrible that they would genetically engineer their own religious slaves, what would they build, right? And what would they ask their slaves to build and stuff? And so you've got these places that go to nowhere, and these people who change their minds, and you have people who don't maintain anything, and it's or they maintain them for all the wrong reasons, like somebody defecated here, therefore let's have a little gift shop around it and stuff like that. It's like it's
Yeah.
like getting into how the place is a piece of the psychology
Pure
of the
chaotic
people.
evil.
Well, I don't even know if the puppets are evil or if they're just not that great at stuff, plus essentially being neutral, right? Because anyway, I don't know. I don't we could get into a whole discussion on like, are the puppets evil? And it would
There's
be a
another
complicated
philosophy
discussion.
question.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I find the Earth super boring, and so there's a push factor for me to get away from anything that looks like it's here, because I've seen it all before. And it may be that my attention span is really short, and I've seen the Earth, been here, it's great. If I want to go for a walk, I'll do that, but if I'm not going to visit the Earth in my fiction. So it's a bit of that too, the asteroids too.
Yeah, I love that. The Earth is super boring. I think I'm gonna have that printed on a t-shirt.
Yep.
Is there anyone in particular in your life who's inspired a character in either this book or any of your other books?
So I don't think I've admitted this in other podcasts or interviews, so this might be a scoop, but I am terrible at names. And so there are many people in my books who are just named for people who happened to be sitting beside me while I was writing. And I like Will Gander once, the character in The Quantum Magician, I was writing with Jeff Gander, a friend of mine in my writing group. And I said, Jeff, I think I'm going to need to use your name. He's like, sure. And I said, but I'm not going to use your whole name because that'd be silly. So what was your grandfather called? And he says, it was William. And I said, perfect. Will Gander is now the aging con man in my book. I think if we wanted to do an example from from this book here, The Quantum War, I have a friend, Erin, who helps me run a convention. And so she became a puppet because the morning I was writing that, I was like Twitter, encouraging her and me and a person called Tyler, who also helps us run this convention. And Tyler, I played D&D with him, and he has this character called Jumbo, who is this, big, dumb, like he does his line in D&D when he's role playing is he does one job and does it well. And Jumbo is he's
I love
such
that.
a great character, like so funny and so earnest that I made a character called Jimbo, off of Jumbo. And it's obviously there's lots of differences, and when you get into puppet psychology, all of a sudden everything's different. But this earnest, character who just wants to do well but is just not good at it. It was a ton of fun to write. And so
Yeah.
Jimbo the puppet is
just really desperately wants to do well.
Oh, he wants to be a good boy. He so wants to be the good boy. Yeah.
D&D is, I think, one of those things that people can really underestimate in terms of writing and like storytelling skill. So
and I came to it both early and late, because I started playing D&D in grade 5 or 6, so it would have been like 1980, 1981, something like that. But I was just a murder hobo. You just go around, kill anything that has a line medieval, and then move on, take the treasure, get your experience. And when I found out how people really play it now as adults, I'm like, that sounds terrible. And like all this role playing and improvisation and everything else, I was like, this sucks. And because I'm not a natural performer in that way. Like I am a performer with my fingers on the keyboard, but I'm not I'm not funny to start with, nor am I very interesting. So I mean, those are two shots against being a performer. But my friend Nicole Lavigne said, why don't you play the exact opposite of like what you would actually do, and then use that as training for your writing? And she knows my weakness. She knows that if there's anything that improves my writing, I'm going to do it. So anyway, I joined my friends and ended up playing, a character very much out of character with me. And I've gone on to play other characters who are very much out of character for me, and it's been a good experience. But I gotta say, the first 6 months I wasn't there for the patience. It was just so tough to switch gears. But now I think I'd like to do more improv training. I've got a friend of mine who's acted, and maybe I'll get him to teach me. The other thing is, just to close off on this question, there are plenty of other people who I think have inspired me in my life and in my writing. But again, I'll go back to any resemblance, any person, living or dead, is purely coincidental.
Yes, of course.
With underlining purely and underlining coincidental.
Yep, absolutely. Always the caveat.
Especially Marie. Purely coincidental.
Yeah. So, obviously, we love sci-fi. We love sci-fi in this house, on this podcast, and very clearly so do you. Otherwise, I don't know why you do this. Was throughout sort of those very early writing, and was it always sci-fi? Was it always going to be sci-fi?
I think if you go into a bookstore and sci-fi and fantasy is together, right? I kind of in my head have it that way too. I think, it just depends on whether your dial is set to very scientific or not at all scientific, right? The magic's still there, right? A lightsaber or light speed or anti-gravity, all of that stuff is magic anyway. It's just we put certain conceits and aesthetics around it, and we say, oh yes, wink wink, it's of course it's true or possible or whatever. But in the end, it's all stuff we're just making up. It just depends what you're using the basis for. And so I would say that I'm more drawn to sci-fi because of my science fiction, my science interests, and
Hmm.
my science bent and the way I think. But I'm equally open to really well done fantasy, and as we mentioned before, I'm
Hmm.
writing fantasy too, and I wrote short fantasy as well. So yeah,
But definitely sci-fi and fantasy.
over fantasy, yeah, I think
Hmm.
so. Although we'll
Yeah.
see. Maybe in the next few years, I'll go on a fantasy binge. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm happy with either. And not that it's, my call, but
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing. Do you have a favorite either sci-fi or fantasy movie?
I don't think that movies do sci-fi or fantasy really well. And I say that as somebody who doesn't watch a lot of movies, especially
Hmm.
not, in the last 10 years, say. Um, and so growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I mean, okay, so obviously I was in the drive-in when I was 6 years old when Star Wars was there. It blew
Hmm.
my mind. And I mean, you can't get away from that, right? Star
Yeah.
Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, absolute masterpieces for
Hmm.
people who are between the ages of 8 and 12 years old. And once you've seen them at that age, they're always going to be perfect to
Yeah.
you. Um, I did not watch the Lord of the Rings movies. I saw the first one and I just felt that it was too much of a departure from
Hmm.
the books. And what really drew me to the books, I watched The Hobbit, the first movie,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was like, wow, they sure made it explodey. When it had nothing to
Yeah.
do with explodey in The Hobbit.
Yeah, I
So
actively avoided those.
yeah, so as far as movies go, not so much, but I will say that I haven't seen it in a while, but when I saw it a couple of times, I thought that Gattaca was one of the best
Hmm.
sci-fi movies I'd ever seen or that had ever been done. And I would make the same point about Westworld on HBO right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
That I think some of the best science fiction I've ever seen
It's really
on
great. And
screen.
for listeners in the UK, I think it's on Sky One.
Yeah, so I had to watch it through a Crave Plus subscription in Canada.
Hmm.
But yeah, just I think the earnest commitment to staying in the scientific and science fictional questions, like what happens when you can make artificial intelligence, and what would you use it for, and what's the worst
Yeah.
thing you could use it for, and what's the best thing you could use it for. And it's just the storytelling skills and the way they play with time, with perspective, with theme
Hmm.
is just so good. And I mean, you've got actors on there that are just killing it. So
Yeah.
I would say that probably that for me is the best depiction. I think I will say too that Game of Thrones, um, ultimately the whole series is not my cup of tea, but I did
Hmm.
watch like 3 or 4 seasons of it um, on HBO. Really,
Hmm.
really good. I felt it was well done, and I think it comes to the point of like, what are your production values and what's your budget like, and
Yeah.
not how many explosions is it, because I think there's a lot of things that just go to explosions and think that that's going to be
Yeah.
it. So all of your Transformer stuff or anything else that really depends on explosions is not even going to be
Mm.
like, it's almost a disqualifying thing. And in
Yeah.
fact, I've been rewatching some of the Star Wars movies, like the 7, 8, and 9 recently
Hmm.
this week. And I'm skimming through some of the explodey parts. I know there's yeah. I think they went a little too far on the explodey parts and a little too far
Yeah.
on some of the coincidentally parts and stuff like that.
Mm.
But still good movies for sci-fi fans.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a film critic, Mark Commode, who's on the BBC radio here. And I remember, I don't know how old I was, it was a few years ago now. And he reviewed, I think, the first Transformers movie, or maybe the second one. And it literally, his review was just him banging his head on various surfaces
Yeah.
because of all the explosions and the lack of, really most anything else.
I will say too, though, the Harry Potter movies are super well constructed. They're tight. They're well written, especially the
Mm.
first 3 or 4. And those are great too. I think that, like, if you're just looking at, was it well done?
Yeah.
Is it emotionally impactful? Absolutely, those do really well.
Definitely. I watch them generally every Christmas.
Oh, okay, cool. That's you're committing what, probably 20 hours then to
It's a lot of
watch.
time.
Yeah. Okay, that's really cool. That's
It's
really
quite
cool.
a nice tradition just to have some a ritual.
Yeah, I think I could do one or two every year. I'm not sure I'd do the whole thing.
Yeah, you could do it like over a number of years, like spread it out.
Hmm.
It is a lot. It's a big commitment. Like I think last year we only ended up doing like maybe 4 Harry Potter movies. And to be
Yeah.
fair, the fourth one is my least favorite. So at that point I was done.
The Goblet of Fire, is that because Diggory
Mm-hmm.
dies?
No, though I was a teenager watching Twilight at the time. So
Uh-huh.
no, it was my favorite of the books, and the movie felt like it took a lot away. My
The,
favorite bits of the books were a lot of the kind of walking in corridors, talking, those bits, which
yeah.
obviously don't translate that well, but I thought they'd done that really well in the first 3, and
I
then 4 came along and lost it.
Yeah, well, I think the size of the books is the difference,
Mm,
because the first 3 books are small enough that literally everything that's in the book got onto the
mm,
screen. And 4 was the place where the books got so big that they had to make choices.
mm.
And yeah, depending on what they don't put in the movie, you might be missing something, or they speed something up, or the pacing
Yeah.
changes and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it was, and then they started splitting them into 2 movies from 5, I think, or maybe
It
6.
was the 7th book
It's
they broke into 2 movies,
they
I think.
did
Because
they
there's only
did
8 movies altogether, isn't there?
I think there's 9. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look it up now. I think they
Okay.
didn't they do Half
If
Blood Prince in 2?
you're wrong, Rebellion has to send me chocolate again.
Okay, I'll take that bet. Though really the expert is Hannah, who is our marketing manager. She really, really loves everything Harry Potter. So she is gonna be really mad at me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
Um I
I've
think
gotten accustomed to Rebellion sending me, either giving me chocolate when I'm in the UK, or sending me chocolate across the Atlantic, at probably a terrible carbon footprint, but
uh, was it 2 movies? I'm gonna be wrong now, and I'm gonna be mad at myself.
that's okay.
Nope, it was 1 movie. It
Maybe it
was
just
1
felt like
movie.
2.
Yeah, I think it was just so long it felt like 2. But yes, no, you were right, and now I only owe you chocolate.
Rebellion owes me chocolate.
I think it'll be me. I think I will be responsible. Yeah. I'm really surprised about that. Anyway, I'm gonna Google that more later. Um,
Well, it is almost Christmas,
that's true. Well, we have
like three
Halloween
months.
first.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is, I mean, you can gear yourself up, and you can, like, literally do the whole series at Christmas now. Like, you can
Yeah,
plan.
yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm gonna get through all my Halloween movies first. I'm a big movie fan, so I
Oh yeah.
have rituals. So I've got to do Nightmare Before Christmas, which could be a Christmas movie or a Halloween movie. I take it
Hmm.
as a Halloween. Hocus Pocus, Halloween Town, Practical Magic, and then like an occasional horror movie, but I'm not very good at those. They get
Me
stuck in my
neither.
head, and I don't need that.
Agree.
So we had a listener email in and ask what you're reading at the moment.
That's I finally have a new answer. So for the last 2 years, I've been finding just the combination of the world and everything else
Mm-hmm.
hasn't left me the bandwidth to engage with new fiction very much. So I've been rereading a lot of, like, old comic books, old
Mm-hmm.
Edgar Rice Burroughs books, listening to a lot of podcasts and so on. But I just recently tried again to read Gideon the Ninth and loved it. I Early in the pandemic, I tried reading it and I just couldn't get into it.
Yeah.
And so I realized that, wow, I can read new stuff now. So I'm probably going to pick up an Audible the Harrow the Ninth, but I not yet because I've been reading a Star Wars tie-in book.
Mhm.
And I've got a few other things I want to read. I'm going to get back into epic fantasy and stuff like that. So basically, I'm just at the beginning of getting back into reading that I haven't done in a long time, and I'm excited about it. And part of it is it's a little bit of space while I have some space in my day now that I'm trying to walk a little more.
Mm. Yeah, I think I definitely lost really any reading at the beginning of the pandemic. I think we all just lost the bandwidth collectively. And when the world is on fire, I don't have the mind space to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of which, how have you found the experience of being published in a pandemic compared to sort of other experiences you've had?
So if the pandemic had never happened, the hardcover of the House of Sticks would have come out in August, I believe, of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have gone to a number of conventions. I would have done I wouldn't have done a book tour because that's a bit of a grandiose word, but I mean, I would have, done some events and stuff like that. I'd still ended up doing a few podcasts. And then Pollen from a Future Harvest also came out during the pandemic. It came out in the spring. That's a novella set in the same universe as the Quantum Evolution. It just, I think, there's on one side, you've got the whole, authors have to boost their signal, authors have to get out there and market and everything else. But I mean, my Twitter following is like 3,000 people. And most of them are friends. So it's not that like my books are necessarily going to be pushed a lot by my own efforts. I do find that Rebellion has done a great job of selling my books. They're great. And I'm happy to like focus on the writing and do the thing I do well, and let Rebellion do the thing it does well, which is moving books, like putting books into people's hands who actually want them. So in a little bit of a sense, it's taken away what I can do to move the books in real life. But I mean, things like this podcast, and I think you and Hannah and others have gotten me on a bunch of podcasts and a bunch of, blog tours and other things for some of my other stuff. And so it's again, Rebellion's doing a great job of getting my books into the hands of people who will like them. And I'll just focus on, trying to add more Jimbo and more Aaron and more Marie.
Oh yeah, 100% more Jimbo.
Oh, Jimbo.
Makes me laugh so much. Okay, so we're good to do the reading if you're ready.
I don't promise I'm going to be good at the reading, but I'm ready to try it. But I will say, just for those keeping score at home sort of thing, we've got a Lieutenant Colonel Barret here, and she was a major in the first book, and now obviously she's got a higher rank and she's not in the same place, and so I like taking my secondary characters and either promoting them to primary characters or just showing how they change across books. I find that to be a lot of fun. Anyway, so chapter 1, April 2515. The sulfuric acid clouds of Venus floated beyond the window, their ochre puffs and hollows and shadows expanding and contracting as winds pulled them. The Scarecrow hadn't spoken for long moments, which wasn't strange for these AIs and their secretive human souls, but this one hummed tunelessly. Lieutenant Colonel Barret had never heard one hum and didn't know what to think. The Scarecrow might not even know it was doing it. The humming had overlapped with a lengthy assessment of Barret's career. A swiveling lens eye zoomed audibly on Barret. The Scarecrows were designed to unsettle observers, but the humming hinted that the Scarecrow might not be entirely stable, as if a parallel track of information processed in the artificial intelligence without its knowledge, as if the AI were haunted. You performed quite satisfactorily in Epsilon Indi for the last 4 years, the Scarecrow said. Her gravelly feminine voice sounded distant, reaching from the other side of death. The impression of femininity might be genuine enough, although scarecrows carried little of their identity past the death of the spies they'd once been. "Thank you," she said. This scarecrow's lines of logic seemed to follow more indirect paths than the ones she'd worked with in Epsilon Indi. That vanished one had been pragmatic, focused, dogged, and rarely mysterious. This one reasoned in elliptical arcs, following multi-layered musical logic. The winds outside became ghostly sounds to those in the mid-levels of the Ministry of Intelligence. The globe building followed the winds at various altitudes, its location at any time a state secret. The scarecrow lumbered to the window, sounding of flexing piezo-ceramic musculature and carbon steel joints. Floppy gloved fingers adjusted a button on the plain carbon weave shirt. "I appreciate your espionage findings on the puppets," the scarecrow said. Her tone was sweet and ghastly, and her accent an antique French from last century. "Your postgraduate work in biotechnology made you uniquely insightful in the field." "I could be out there again," Barré said. "I didn't apply for this promotion, and I haven't been to staff college, and I like the field work." She hadn't found her rhythm in this new role in the last 3 weeks either. It felt like an ill-fitting tunic, and even if she could go back, Epsilon Indi was different now. "The disappearance of your scarecrow is unfortunate," the spectral voice continued. Her statement didn't surprise Barré. The emotion reading software in the interrogation suites was powerful, and they read facial expressions constantly, especially in their own people. One became accustomed to feeling exposed. "I should be continuing his work," Barré said. "That would be a waste," she said with a flat, definitive tone that belied the winsome and flighty feeling in the humming. "Your 3 years under the Epsilon Indi scarecrow were testing." "What kind of testing?" "The kind of testing that never relents." That was a euphemism about the living Venus, the kinds of things grandmothers say as they tuck their children into bed during bucking winds. "Your new posting," the scarecrow finally said. "Is it good?" Upon her transfer back to Venus, Barré had been installed at the head of a new division in the future threats branch of the analysis sector. "It feels like a desk job." The second lens whirred and zoomed onto Barré. The mouth on the metal cloth had been painted uneven and expressionless, but the humming and the higher register of the voice gave it some illusory implied motion. Another scarecrow trick of psychology. "You've been given policy influence here and the ability to task units in the field," the scarecrow said. The humming tune on some other channel slipped its way under the AI's answer. "Lonely, lost. We know we want you, but our wanting only goes so far. At some point, you need to want it." "What do you hope I'll want?" "A broader canvas for your talents," the scarecrow said. "What does that mean?" "Sometimes meanings have to come when they're ready," the gravelly voice said. "Learn more, and we'll talk again." I'll stop there just because that's the start of the Scarecrow Barré tango that's going to go on for a lot of the novel as the Scarecrow is trying to recruit Barré for something a lot less intuitive than Barré has been trained for.
I think that's a very non-spoilery way to say that, and I like it. Perfect. Amazing. Thank you so much for that and for coming on the show.
No, this was a lot of fun, and have fun with your Halloween movie watch and
Thank
your
you.
Christmas
I'm looking
movie
forward
watch.
to it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Thank you so much again to Derek for joining me, and to all of you for listening and supporting the podcast. If you'd like to get your own copy of The Quantum War in ebook or paperback, you can get an exclusive listener discount when you order from the Rebellion Publishing web store. The code for this month's book, The Quantum War, is OBC-21-QW. And you can use that right up until January to get your discount on the book. Some of the discount codes for our previous books are also still available to use if you wanted to stock up or order any early Christmas presents. including The Lyre of Red Valley, which does include the limited sprayed edge edition, which would make a great gift, as well as Monkey Around and Assassin's Orbit. For November's episode, I'm going to be speaking with Tilda Cold-Holt, author of the Hanged God trilogy, the second book of which has just come out. It's called Shackled Fates. And I'm really looking forward to having her on the show. We are now vaguely counting down to the end of the year, so I thought I'd give you an early heads up that we are going to be doing a really fun festive special with 3 out of 4 of the creators of Campaigns and Companions, the complete role-playing guide for pets. Basically, if your pets played D&D and were kind of jerks about it. It's a really funny and beautifully illustrated book. Highly recommend it if you don't already have it. And if you wanted to get in early and send in your questions for the creators, I'm going to be speaking to Andy Ewington and Rihanna Pratchett, as well as returning book club guest Alex DeCampi. To do that, you can tweet us at Rebellion Pub, you can email publishingpress@rebellion.co.uk, or you can comment on our social posts about the episode when we post our question calls. That will be a little bit nearer the time. I'm really looking forward to being back with those 2 great episodes in the next couple of months. And in the meantime, happy reading!